Hello and welcome to Paul and Ted's Talk Time. Today we're going to be talking about life after death. So, my first question, Paul, is how come nobody knows anything about what happens after here?
Well, I'm not so sure that that's actually accurate, because I'm sure there are many people who do claim to know what is inevitable for us all, which is death. We can't escape that. But I'm sure that there are many people who do claim that they do know. There are many religious belief systems, as an example, that would claim they know for certainty.
But wouldn't that be a faith rather than hard scientific facts, obviously?
Well, there are some theories which claim to have hard scientific facts.
Really?
Yeah, there's concordance models, there's quantum mechanics, there's simulation hypotheses. I mean, out there's a whole host of beliefs, some claiming to be scientifically quantifiable, that claim to know the answer to this overwhelming question.
But nothing which has been established as the real thing. Otherwise, we'd all know about it. I mean, all these things you've mentioned, I can't say I've really heard of any.
Well, yeah, that's true. Me neither. But at a glance, and I say at a glance because I make no claim to be any expert on this matter. But at a glance, reading a cursory glance of these theories, some of them do claim that they are quantifiable. But it's way beyond my scope, and I think most people's, and hence that's perhaps why we haven't heard of them.
So let's go back a step. I mean, I think most people don't start worrying about sort of what happens next until you start to get in that general direction. And here we are. Well, I'm 60. Paul's a year younger than myself. And of course, now we start to think about such things because they become relevant to us. And, this is when, a lot of people who have, genuine faiths, religions, for want of a better way of putting it, already have their idea clearly mapped out of the afterlife.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where the faith that you've already made reference to comes into play. I'm only speaking for myself here. I'm not attempting to knock anybody's belief system, but as far as I'm concerned, I think people just run for refuge, for their comfort zone.
Well, yeah, it's a strong one, though, isn't it? I mean, why wouldn't you?
Well, yes, but it kind of makes a mockery of it all, because if you're like me, you were raised as a Christian, then you're going to be conditioned into that Christian faith, and yes, woe and behold, here I am at 59, carrying that Christian faith with me, and when I think about, yes, the twilight years are coming for me, I take refuge in this sense that there's a Christian God.
Okay, so what do Christians believe in then, or what do they think is going to happen next?
It's a dual concept of heaven and hell. So some religions don't have this dual concept. Orthodox Christianity doesn't, but Christianity has this concept of heaven and hell.
So you're going to have either going to be in trouble or you're going to be all right. Is that along those lines?
Yeah, yes, but there are many religions that take a different view. I mean, Shintoism, the Japanese religion, they have a very gloomy view of death. It's a gloomy underground realm with a river separating the living from the dead.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Hinduism.
I like that more. I like the Hinduism. That I can go with that a little bit. Is this the reincarnation, isn't it?
Well, that's Buddhism. Buddhism, isn't it?
Is it? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Buddhism is based on the belief that you are reincarnated
back on Earth again.
Back on Earth, and if you've been morally upright, light, so to speak,
Mhm.
and compassionate and kind, you come back as a higher being, like as we are. But if you fall short of that, then
Mm.
you are reincarnated down the ladder in terms of the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
This is the way that they view the
And are they
afterlife. Very
expecting?
simplistic
And
view.
yeah, okay. So are they expecting you then to rerun the whole show and do it better next time? I mean,
Well,
is that the theory?
this is the general theory,
Okay. All right.
but it's a fascinating subject because none of us are going to avoid it. Of course, this is stating the obvious,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm.
but it is interesting on how we all seek a refuge in these belief systems, which are so diverse and so different. Some religious faiths, some scientific beliefs,
Mm.
uh, but there are thousands and thousands of these different
Yeah. Well, I
beliefs.
mean, I can understand that. I'm not comfortable with the idea of having absolutely no idea what's going to be happening in a few years from now. Absolutely no idea what is going to be happening to me for all time. And what we're like 10, 15, 20, 25 years at tops away from this. And we have absolutely no clue whatsoever as what's going to happen. So you got to understand.
From you don't.
No, yeah, me.
I would say everybody doesn't. But
Yeah, well,
I'm
it's me.
contradicting what I've just said
Yeah,
here
but
because
it's me I'm worried about because it's me who's facing this. I don't have to worry too much about everybody else. They'll do their own worrying. I mean, but for me, Paul, here we are on the doorstep of this without the foggiest idea what's going on.
but you keep emphasizing this word worry with a sense of anxiety as if it's all negative.
Okay, yeah.
Why do you take
Well,
that?
scared of the unknown, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, I suppose that's a definition of fear, isn't it?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But
Well, how about you? Are you comfortable with the whole situation?
I'd like to try and sound clever and say, well, there's very little that I can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go with
why
that.
why worry about it?
Mm.
But I think I'm human like the rest of us, and I have that hidden sense of fear.
So where's your refuge? Where do you run to?
I run to an. I take the example of anesthetic.
Anesthetic?
Yeah,
Oh, that's a temporary one.
no, I mean, for me, that would make the most sense for me.
Well, explain. What do you mean?
Well, when you undergo anesthetic, as you know, you're totally unaware to your sensations. Your mind, your body, everything, every domain of your body, you're unaware of. And for me, that's what a death is.
Yeah, but I mean that's forever. I mean, how's that supposed to sit? I mean, are you just now saying, well, you're going to run out your time, you're 15, 20, 25 years from now, or maybe a lot sooner, who knows?
Well, thank you very much for that, my friend.
The thing is, and then what? Then it all goes black and that's it. Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't like that idea at all.
Well, you might not like it, but posit an alternative.
Okay, well, I like to be reincarnated. I can go with that because you get a second bite of the cherry. I mean, I have this belief, well, not a belief, but I have this sort of idea which settles well with me. The fact is, you will come back here on Earth, and I think, as you mentioned, Buddhism goes with this idea. I think Hinduism does as well to some extent. I read this up earlier, and it does. You come back and you're reincarnated. I don't like to use soul and body because it's all too loose, but basically you get a rerun. You get to do this.
As what?
Well, that's it. But that's the unknown, and apparently, as you say, it kind of depends on how well you've done on this run. But you do get to rerun it.
All right. So you're saying you kind of get a rerun. Who
Mhm.
decides?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we don't know. Then we're sort of into the area of the somebody up there who decides all this.
Well, this is where it all gets a bit airy-fairy.
Well, it does, but it's airy-fairy in the first place because we're still no closer to coming to terms with this, to finding out. Now, I'm sure we've been getting a few comments after our last video, and it'd be interesting to hear what people think on this, because everybody will have a definite idea. But for me, this is one of a few things where I have absolutely no idea. I don't have any concept of what happened. And one thing, Paul, I tell you what, I mean, my earlier question is, how come nobody knows? How come? Is it because we're not supposed to know? Or we haven't dug deep enough?
Well, maybe there's nothing to know.
Okay. Would you settle for that? I'm not so sure I would.
Well, I've got a trillion choices out there to choose
Pick
from.
one. Well, what's your favourite? What would you most like to, apart from the anaesthetic? Yeah?
Okay, all right. I would like to go with the Christian.
Which
God.
is? Sit upon the right hand of God the Father Almighty. That one, the one we did at school.
You asked me which one would I like. I'll take that one.
Okay.
How about you?
Yeah. Well, seagull. I'd like to be a seagull. My mum always used to say she'd like, if she came back again as an animal, she'd like to be a seagull. She thought that
So you can steal people's ice cream on
ice
the
cream,
promenade.
get to watch
that
football
sounds about
games for
right.
free. You know, I mean, there's various things a seagull can do which they'll be better off than here. But you know, seriously, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, what other religions do we have? And you know,
Well, we have the biggies. We have Islam. But even they have. I mean, I'm no imam and no expert on Islam, but even they have their branches and different interpretations of the afterlife.
Yeah, I mean they have.
But doesn't it render all this a mockery? Because not everyone can be right.
Yeah, I mean, a very, very small percentage are going to be right, and there's also a chance that nobody is right. I mean, the Islamic belief of Jannah, which is the equivalent to heaven. I mean, yeah, that sounds really good if you get that. I mean, that's not a bad one to go for at all. But I mean, the thing is, Paul, what do you think as we get closer to death? Let's run this logically. As we get closer to death, are we going to analyze this more closely? Are we going to start asking more questions? Or are we just going to settle for the whatever will be, will be?
It's $1 million question, because you don't know what you're going to be afflicted by. You might, for example, start to get dementia, and then it all becomes oblivion anyway.
Right.
But I think the process is pretty cruel for most people.
Cruel in what respect?
Well, the deterioration, I mean, how many people go to bed of a night when they're old and it switch off the lights and the lights never come back on?
Yeah.
That's a kind of humane kind of way of signing off for me. But I mean, so many people, I mean, I don't know the data on this. I don't know the percentage of, how many have a cruel, fated illness and die painfully and slowly and miserably, as opposed to those that just switch off the light and go to bed and never wake up.
Dying young have any influence here, do you think? Is this anything to work with?
Well, dying is dying.
Dying is dying. Okay, so it makes no difference if you die when you're 85 or if you die when you're like 4 or 5 years old.
Well, again, I mean, some would argue that, for example, God has taken you away. And,
yeah, well, that's a very popular belief.
It's running for refuge, I think, again, for the solace and the comfort.
Yeah, for the parents or whoever's involved with somebody who dies at that very young age.
And I hope that for those that it's happened, that's the case.
Definitely.
Nobody would, I think, want any other outcome for them.
Do you think the fact is, and I know you dispute this, but I mean, do you think that the fact that we don't know, or rather we don't know clearly, is there a significance in there?
I think it's a pretty bleak and cruel experiment that something or somebody is playing at. If there is some kind of God-like figure, I think.
What, the ants in the jar? Here are the ants. What are they doing? Nothing. oh, let's shake them up a bit.
Yeah, it's
you know?
like, oh yes, that's going a bit too well. I'm going to rattle the cage and make it bleak.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people who have religious beliefs
Mm.
who, if you say to them, how old is the universe?
Mm.
They have no idea.
Right.
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 But if you're looking at it, the origins of the universe from a scientific perspective, it's 250, 300,000 years old, right?
Do you think that has some bearing or some significance in relation to the subject? I mean, in as much as the fact that
it just goes to show, how blinded perhaps some people can be because they rigidly stick to their belief.
Now, I know this is a point sometimes we argue about, the insignificance of us. Do you think this is an important point, the fact that we are, in fact, if you look at your universe and the sheer size of the universe, and Paul does some studies here before, and he sent me these things and show just how minute in relation to outer space is. I mean,
the analogy, the favorite analogy I like to use, and I can't remember the scientist, Lawrence somebody, his name is, and I can never. So forgive me, Lawrence, if you're watching. I can't remember your surname, but he's comes under those umbrellas of those very heavyweights of philosophy and science, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and so forth. And I think it was him who mentioned that there are more grains of sand on Earth than there are more stars, in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. Now, if that doesn't put it into your significance into perspective, I don't know what does. And when I start thinking on that kind of scale, it becomes mind-boggling when you look at the diameter of the solar system and the universe, and it's we start thinking light years, and you get to a certain point, and then some clever guy will say, well, that's just the beginning, and then we've got this period and this name for this solar system and this universe, and it just expands and goes on and on and on.
Doesn't help us though, does it? It just makes it all a bit worse. I mean, we're faced with the fact that we're totally insignificant in the grand scheme of things due to the size of things out there and the multitude of stars or whatever you've been looking at there. And it just goes to show that although we'd like to think differently, in fact that we are totally insignificant. And why should we be worrying about ourselves? Because I'm sure nobody else is either. Or is that all a bit too bleak as well?
Well, it'll be bleak for those dogs if they don't stop barking. Well, let me ask you a very simple question. I think you've already answered it, but let me ask it again. Do you have a positive outlook or a negative outlook for your beyond the life?
I think positive, because one has to go with positive. I mean, because you have a straightforward choice and you can basically make up your own story. Well, I think you can make up your story. You can choose.
That doesn't render it valid.
No. But you do have a choice. But nothing's valid because nobody knows. What?
I don't get the choice.
You can choose what you believe in.
Okay. That doesn't help anybody.
No, it doesn't. But we don't know, and we've established the fact we don't know, and we've established there's thousands and thousands of different takes on what happens next. So we're allowed to choose one. And you said, is it positive or negative? I'll go for the positive. Yeah.
But why is it that we can't just accept that we don't know? Well, because those that claim to do know often will die for their belief.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, those people that slam those planes into the World Trade Center, they firmly believed that they were going to an afterlife.
Yeah,
that's how powerful it can be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But in our case, I think we're faced with
Coco.
I think we're faced with the the bare facts, that we really have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah. So, we have to carry on thinking, and it's an interesting point, that when you're young, you certainly don't think about these things. When you're in your 20s or your 30s, I think you kind of sort of don't worry too much, and unless you have a religious bent of some description. But as you get older, then perhaps it becomes more significant, for obvious reasons, that the fact is about to happen to you. But I don't think we can come to any real conclusions at all. But you said, is it positive or negative? I'll go for a positive here. And I think here's another important point. The fact that we don't know that what's going to happen, and if you have any kind of belief that there is a greater being in the form of God, then you've got to put the two together and think, well, you haven't been told, or you're not supposed to know, because you're not supposed to precipitate it. But what I mean by that is, the fact is, if you knew that the next thing coming along is better, then you'd kind of hurry it along. You think, well, let's just go down the road there and jump off the bridge and then move on to the next one, because the next one will be better.
Well, I mean, I don't want to have a pop at Islam here, but that's what those people in that plane were doing, weren't they? Basically, they were saying, we believe in this, and our afterlife is coming, and the glory of that life is ours to have, isn't it?
But I mean, there's lots of instances where people are dying for their faith, and not just in Islam, all over the place.
Well, give me an example of one.
Well, let's have a think. I mean, going back to the war, the kamikazes, there must have been something there,
That was war. That was, well, I suppose.
Yeah, but it's still, dying for a cause, isn't it? I mean, we should say, and I don't think we're at that stage yet. But we're definitely, in a situation where every day you get a little bit closer to the inevitable, and every day you're going to question this a little bit more, thinking what's coming up next.
I think the fact that we don't know, and if you take the perspective that there is something up there that's monitoring our behavior, then they're very cunning in the sense that, let's see how he does or she does, and we'll give them X amount of years, and then we can have a little judgment day at the end of it. Otherwise, I can't.
Do you see a judgment day? Is that something which you think is going to come to pass? We're going to be lined up there and have to face somebody who knows all about what we've been up to?
Well, if there is, I can safely say I think I'm pretty safe compared to a lot of other people, but I don't know, Doc. I really don't.
Well, wrapping up today, what have we learnt, Paul? Have we learnt anything? Have we come to any conclusion?
Well, I think not. And I don't think anybody ever can. But it's certainly an interesting one, isn't it?
Where would you go from here to try and find out more? What would be your next step?
I don't think I can. I think I take a fatalistic view, and I take the view that, whatever's going to be will be, and you can't alter that. We all know that we're going there. I say you can't alter that. Some people again would say, well, you can. You can go and become a Muslim or a Christian or something like that. But for me personally, I think, sadly, I'm tempted to say you switch off the light at night, you go to bed and you don't wake up, and that's it. That's the end. That's the end game. But there's a part of me which says, and especially like we made reference to earlier on, there's a part of me which says, when you start looking at the grand, incomprehensible scheme of things, well, maybe there is something out there. I don't know, Doc. I don't know.
Well, there you go. We don't know. So that's it. We'll call it a day.
And don't forget to let us know your thoughts. There's a subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that. And we'll look forward to hearing from your comments. And we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye then. Goodbye.